My name is Holly Winter, and I'm the Executive Director for the Central Midwest Georgia chapter. We're going to kick off momentarily, but first, a few housekeeping things. Please make sure you're muted and you have your camera turned off. We will have time for questions after our guest speaker, so please hold your questions for that time or send them in the chat at the bottom of the screen. And now to get us started this evening, our board chair, Ms. Bikel Fresnel, everyone.
Good evening and welcome everyone to our Sickle Cell Virtual Forum. I am the chair for the Central Midwest Georgia chapter. I've been a volunteer for 9 years and I'm so excited to see you guys tonight here on this virtual forum. I want to say a special thanks to my chair, Elizabeth Stargell, to her co-chair, Terrell Anderson, and our executive director, Holly Winter. Since our founding by Clara Barton on May 21st, 1881, the American Red Cross has dedicated to serving people in need. In 2021, the Red Cross celebrated 140 years of compassionate service. Today, as throughout our long history, the Red Cross depends on generous contributions of time, blood, and money from the American public to support life-saving services such as sickle cell and other programs. We invite you to learn more about our history and hope you will feel inspired to become more involved with the American Red Cross. And we want you to sit back and relax and enjoy a program with some dynamic speakers tonight. Thank you so much, Holly.
Thank you, Bikel. We are thrilled to have Dr. Bielaski with us this evening. She is a board certified physician in blood banking and transfusion medicine. She received her training at UCLA and joined the team of medical directors at the American Red Cross in 2019. She is currently the medical director for the Georgia region. Dr. Laski's career interests include platelet transfusion practices, inventory stewardship, and pediatric transfusion medicine. Besides caring for immediate donors and patient needs in her region, she's actively engaged with her Red Cross team members to educate and engage with the community regarding sickle cell disease and the need for diverse blood. Welcome, Dr. Laski.
Hi, good evening. Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And so I'm just going to give you a little overview of what sickle cell disease is and why we need diverse donors. Next slide. So the basis for sickle cell disease comes from one aberration, one mutation in DNA, which causes hemoglobin, which is the protein in your red blood cells, to carry oxygen. And so the result is that it causes the red cells, which are normally passing through your circulation to deliver oxygen, and it causes them to acquire a sickled shape, thus the name sickle cell disease. So they actually become sickle shaped. And so this does two things. It blocks the arteries such that the blood cannot flow. Blood is cut off. Blood flow is cut off. And then also there's impaired gas exchange. So the oxygenation process is also impaired. So this decreases blood flow and oxygen to organ and tissues. And everyone should probably know we need air, right? We need oxygen. So this has devastating effects on every organ and every tissue in the body. And it also leads to increased cell fragility, which means that the cells are breaking, and so they're not lasting for as long as a healthy cell does. Next slide. So what this results in, clinically speaking, is manifests all over the body. We see symptoms typically show up in infancy. They can vary in severity from person to person, but they generally worsen over time. Severe pain is the most common complication that leads sickle cell patients to the emergency room, and they do have a shortened life expectancy of approximately 45 years. And over on the right, just really quickly, we can see that it affects the brain. It's actually one of the most common causes of stroke in children. And it's this, similar manifestations that can impair cognitive function or body function. It affects their liver, their gallbladder, their kidneys, their reproductive processes, their bones can have impaired blood flow such that these patients often have to have, or sometimes have to have, joint replacement even as young as a teenager. They can have complications in their pregnancies. They can become septic. They have heart failure, high blood pressure in their lungs, and problems in their eyes. So it's really an actually devastating disease. Next slide. So how does this impact our community? Well, it's the most common inherited blood disease in the United States. It takes parents, each with either who have sickle cell disease or who have the trait, which means you are carrying one copy of the sickled hemoglobin. And so for two parents who are carrying the trait, they have a 25% chance of having a child with sickle cell disease. And this results in it impacts 1 in every 365 Black or African American births, and it affects approximately 100,000 Americans. Next slide. So the treatment, there are some medical treatments, but one of the main treatments is blood transfusion. And so we have two processes. One is called a simple transfusion, is with 1 to 2 units, which is usually when someone comes in and they're very low in their hemoglobin because the cells perhaps have been breaking. We call that hemolysis. And so we might need to just increase them, or we could do what's a prophylactic or preventive to prevent stroke, and that would involve an exchange transfusion. So that would be 3 to 10 units, where you can see the picture of this little gentleman here is attached to this instrument, and it's drawing his unhealthy cells out and replacing them with healthy cells. And so the annual consumption for a patient who is on some sort of blood transfusion protocol can require 36 to over 120 units per patient per year. So if you think about a hospital that has a sickle cell program with only 10 patients, they could require up to 1,200 units per year. Next slide, please. So why do we need diversity in the blood supply? Well, there is an increased chance of finding matched blood from donors who are ethnically or genetically similar to the patient. And so as we are understanding more and more about genetics, and I like to say that red cells look like faces. We all have the same basic parts of the eyes, nose, and the mouth, but we all look different. And so the cells have the same sort of features. They don't have a face, but they have different proteins that are expressed for different purposes that all look a little bit different from person to person. Next slide. So when we start talking about the proteins on these cells, whenever your body sees something that is not you, it sees it as foreign, and your immune system will respond. And that's a good thing. When your body encounters a virus or a bacteria, it identifies it as not you, and it will form an antibody and target it for destruction. Well, when someone receives lots of blood transfusions, their body sees a lot of proteins that don't belong to them, and they form antibodies against them. And the more dissimilar the blood transfusion that they receive, the more likely they are to form an antibody, which is the importance of why we are trying to find appropriately matched blood. So we're trying to find blood that is most similar to their own to prevent the antibodies from forming. So if we take a look at this, will not mean anything to you besides maybe you'll probably know that blood comes in types A, B, AB, or O, but there's actually dozens of proteins, and so we call them D, C, E, Kel, and so forth. That's not so important. But if we take a typical African-American patient with sickle cell disease and give them this profile, if we screen 250 units of blood from Caucasian donors, next slide, we may find 1 in 250 units. And that unit is perfectly matched for that patient. It's just less likely to find because it's just a lot. Those particular features are less common in the Caucasian population. Next slide. Now, if we screen the same number of units, but from Black or African American donors, we'll find 28 matches, or we're more likely to find 28 matches. So it's just helpful for us to diversify our blood donor pool or our blood pool, because it allows us better chances of finding the correctly matched blood. Next slide. So you can see here, this is the US Census data from 2019. Black or African American individuals comprise about 13.4% of the American population, or the US population. Next slide. That you can see with this is our the American Red Cross donor database, and you can see we only have only 4% of our population is African American, so we have a gap there, and that also speaks to just wanting a more diverse blood supply, so that we are interacting with all communities for the benefit of all of our patients. Next slide. So what happens when we can't find the correctly matched blood? Well, what happens is the patient will either not be transfused at all, or they will have their care delayed or impacted in some way. And so we hear about these patients, sometimes they may be in a pain crisis or having what's called acute chest syndrome, and it's very difficult for them to breathe. And if we don't have enough of the correctly matched blood, their care, sometimes they're just sitting in the hospital waiting for blood. Or if it's very low and very emergent, the physicians may choose to transfuse with mismatched blood. Next slide. So what happens when you transfuse mismatched blood? Like I was describing earlier, the expression of proteins is determined by your DNA, and that varies among populations. And so exposure to the red blood cells causes the antibodies to be formed. And then when the patient sees those same proteins again, the next time, the antibodies will attack the red cells, and a number of things can happen. This is not a benign process. Number one, it's destroying the red cells that we transfuse, so it's completely defeating the purpose of why we're transfusing. But worse than that, when you start having the red cells breaking inside the circulation, it can result in kidney failure, the state of where the whole body is starting to clot, or it causes what's called hyperhemolysis, where not only are the donor red cells breaking, but because of this very brisk, robust immune response with the antibodies, it actually starts to break the patient's own red cells, and they actually start out even worse than when they started, and this can be fatal. So finding the correctly matched blood is very important. Next slide. So back in 2019, pre-pandemic, we had distributed 96,000 specialty units. So that means that it's negative for certain proteins to either avoid the patient from forming antibodies, or to prevent them from being re-exposed so that they won't have that hemolysis state. And at the time, African American donors were providing about 47% of the units. And then you can see the green line in this graph below, this is the number of total African American donors. And you can see how we've seen a steep decline after COVID. Of course, we've seen a decline in all of our blood donors, but we still have the same number of patients with sickle cell disease still needing the same amount of blood. So you can see how this had impacted the community. COVID impacted the community of patients with sickle cell disease because we had a reduced amount of blood coming in. Next slide. So the American Red Cross has been partnering with communities across the country. We're holding events like this now to provide education and to engage in the community to raise awareness. We've done that over the past year with groups of historically Black colleges and universities, faith-based organizations. We're working with organizations such as Sickle Cell Foundation of Georgia and other regional organizations. And we've hired a number of account managers to just develop and support our sickle or our diverse blood collections. But really, one of the main patient populations is the patients with sickle cell disease. Enhancing our donor selection process and testing our blood in a way that we can identify compatible blood more readily, more easily. And then we also partner with the American Rare Donor Program, which is a national and interorganizational organization that facilitates the sharing of rare blood. So we give blood in, and then we also have access to it, which is very useful for patients with the most rare blood types. Next slide. So just your final takeaways here for what do you need to know about sickle cell disease is that patients with sickle cell disease are transfusion dependent for life. Not all of them need blood transfusions, but for the ones that do, they need it for the duration of their lives. And we are not always meeting the needs of our patients. Like I said, sometimes we have delayed care or we're providing them with not the best match blood. And failure to treat them appropriately has serious health consequences, including decreased life expectancy. And patients who have sickle cell disease are dependent on specific individual donors who are genetically similar. And I just want to briefly describe a patient that we have here in the Southeast, a 24-year-old young woman, and she has such a unique blood type of all of these different combinations of proteins that we've identified only 8 donors for her across about 5 states. And one of them has been keeping her alive for much of her life, much of her childhood, and he's now aging out and unable to donate. And it really demonstrates just how important that it's not just the volume of donors, which is also important, but that every single person has the ability to be that life source of blood for actually an individual person, which is very powerful and really an amazing way that donors, what I like to talk about is creating a culture of blood donation, and that when people become blood donors, they really have, whether they actually know the patient that receives their blood, but just to know that you're giving somebody life I hope that message that I can spread, that it's the most powerful gift that you can give to somebody. And so we really also need people who will become lifelong donors. If you donate once and maybe feel like it's not for you, that's okay. But we really, the people who become lifelong donors really have the power to change people's lives. Next slide, please. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take questions now, or anyone can feel free to email me.
Thank you, Dr. Lasky, for that great information. Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Stargell. I am the chairperson of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the Central Midwest Georgia chapter of the American Red Cross. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and again, we welcome you. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker tonight, Ms. Kiera Jennings. Ms. Jennings is a native of LaGrange, Georgia. She is the daughter of Donald and Lakeisha Jennings. Ms. Jennings graduated from the Georgia Cyber Academy in 2018. In her spare time, she enjoys painting and yoga. Her desire is to become a hematologist to help sickle cell patients just like herself. Tonight, Kiera will share with us her journey as a sickle cell patient, how this disease has impacted her life and that of her family, and the importance of our blood donations, especially in the African American community. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Ms. Kiera Jennings.
Here we go. Hi guys, so my name is Kiera and I am 21 years old. By looking at me, you of course can't tell that I'm sick or that I have any pain at all, which is the crazy thing about sickle cell is that you can't look at someone and be like, oh, okay, they're sick. So it's much harder for us to get care. Because of my sickle cell, I've had to have both of my hips replaced at the age of 18 from something called avascular necrosis. Because my red blood cells, like the doctor was saying, because mine are sickled and not round shape, it had trouble passing through. So basically it stopped passing through. And when blood doesn't get to bone or tissue, it dies. So it happened to both of my hips. I want to say the blood flow stopped probably when I was like 12 years old, but I was still growing. So I did not get my hips replaced until I was 18. A little after I got my hips replaced, I had a few blood transfusions, but not really. It was only like when I was feeling really bad or I was having like a really bad pain episode, they would just give me a bag, and I would go home. No doctor, except for my doctor, Dr. Collins, he brought up blood exchanges, which is when they take some of your blood out and they put in 5 to 10 units of someone else's blood. I didn't know that was possible. But I was like, I'm definitely gonna try it. So the first time I went, they had to put like this line in my neck and they started taking out my blood and putting in, the donor blood. And at first I didn't really feel anything. And I was like, okay, maybe it'll take take a little bit. So I think it was the next day I woke up and I looked at my mom. I was like, Mama, is this how you feel? Like you can actually like breathe? I was like for the first time, like I felt like I could breathe like really good. And it was crazy. And then I didn't realize because of my sickle cell that because I wasn't getting enough blood flow to my brain that I was having so many headaches. And I was like, so this headache was because of the sickle cell the whole time. It was crazy. I just realized that the pain and all the things that I was experiencing was not normal. And I got that blood exchange and I was like, I was ready to go. I was like, discharge me. I'm gonna go run and do some gymnastics and stuff and slow down. It's only day one of getting the blood, slow down. But it has really changed my life. And it's really made my life worth living again. Honestly, before I got the blood exchanges, I'm gonna be honest, I suffered with depression and I really didn't want to live. I was constantly in and out the hospital. And like I said, because you can't tell I'm sick, I had a lot of nurses and doctors, saying oh, I'm not in pain. I just want attention, that I wasn't that sick. So I was tired of going through so much and just to be told, oh, you're not in pain, But the fact that I was able to get a blood exchange because so many people were donating was truly life-saving, not only to me, but to others also. And I want to talk about when COVID hit. I was doing really good. And when COVID hit, everybody knows the whole world stopped. A lot of people stopped donating. And I know I even heard a few people like, oh, we need to worry about COVID. It's not really important to donate blood right now. Which is not true. Especially with COVID, they wanted the sickle cell patients to stay out of the hospital, but sadly, we were not able to get our exchanges. So we were in the hospital with the COVID patients instead of being at home if we would have got the blood. So during scary times, it really is important to still, donate blood because it is truly life-changing, not only to me, but to others also. And I think people tend to forget that. And another reason why it is truly on my heart for people to, I said I wasn't going to get emotional. But my cousin, she also had sickle cell. She passed away because she couldn't get a blood exchange. It wasn't available to her. And they just didn't know a lot about sickle cell. But that blood exchange would have saved her life and she still would have been here. And I remember when I went into the ICU and I saw her, I looked at her, I gave her a kiss and I said, I promise that I'm never gonna stop fighting for awareness for sickle cell, because no mom should bury their child. She wasn't even 21 yet. But that's another reason why it's really on my heart. And I just want to thank you guys so much for coming. And I'm just gonna say, please donate blood. We really need more people of color to donate blood. It is very important. A lot of people don't think it makes a difference. It makes a difference. Like the doctor was saying, DNA has a lot to do with it. If I get blood and it's from a person not of color, sometimes I have reactions where I start itching or something, and that's my body creating antibodies because they did the best match they could do for my body, but because there wasn't a person of color that donated, that's the best they could do. So it's really important for more people of color to get out there and donate. I say, if you can't donate, that's okay. Share the message. Tell everybody around you to donate. I think on the Red Cross website, you can do your own thing where you can create a group of people and donate blood. I want to thank everyone for listening to my story. Like I said, please donate blood. It truly saves lives. And I want to say thank you to Red Cross for reaching out to me and letting me tell my story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiera, for sharing your story. This is why we're doing this evening, for patients just like you. So at this time, we want to open the floor for just a few questions. If you haven't already had your question answered in the chat, if you would unmute yourself and ask the question. We have Dr. Lasky here, who's an expert to help us out. One question that some people sometimes is if they have sickle cell trait, can they donate blood? And yes, they can. Does someone have a question?
Everybody's being quiet.
Elizabeth, I have a question. This is Sickle.
Okay.
What are some tips for a successful donation that we should know?
That's a good question, Sickle. Number one, hydrate. If you are planning to donate blood, drink water the week up to your blood donation. That will make a significant difference. I'm a living testimony of that. I didn't drink enough water and my blood was like molasses. So drink a lot of water, eat foods that are rich in vitamin C and iron. So another that people have is about their medications. Can go to, hey, Kiera, can you mute yourself, sweetie? As a general rule, most medications will not prevent you from donating as long as the condition that you have is being treated and it is under control, like diabetes. There is no wait time after COVID vaccines and boosters. So some people have a question about that. But if you do have questions about medications or other tips on how to give blood, go to the redcrossblood.org website. Let's see.
Elizabeth, this is
Yes.
Rita. What is the frequency that you can donate blood? I mean, how many weeks do you have to wait between donations?
I believe it is Dr. Lasky and Holly, I believe is 56 days.
That's correct.
Okay. 56 days.
Between a whole blood. And sometimes we'll ask you to, if you can, meet the height and weight requirements at what's called a double red or a power red, which we take the equivalent of 2 units, but we give you back your platelets and plasma, and that would be every 112 days.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lasky. All right, Tia, do you see any other questions in the chat?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I saw something someone sent to me directly. It says, with each donation is blood checked for a match. So they want to know how, I guess, how does that match occur? How do we go about finding the match to folks who have sickle cell?
So that's the function at our immunohematology reference laboratory. We have a lab techs that are working actually 24 hours, 7 days a week. And so they are doing testing on our patients to identify, first of all, what their phenotype is. The phenotype is like what features, what protein combinations they have, as well as what antibodies they've formed. And if there is a blood donor for whom we have a history, then we can just identify and see, do we have any units from that donor? So it's kind of a complex process, but it's facilitated by our computer. And if it's not very complicated, just maybe we have only a few needs, we can just start screening blood from off the shelf. We also have a process of identifying for any donor who self-identifies as African American. We will do we'll take it down our sickle cell screening program, where we will do what's called molecular testing to look for the DNA specific to the proteins that are that we're looking to match. And so we have a number of routes of identifying rare blood. When we do find one that's rare and we don't have an immediate need for it, we will freeze it. And so frozen, we can freeze blood for like 10 years if it's very rare, longer than that. And our lab will, we have a process for thawing it and converting it back to transfusible blood when the patient comes in.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lasky. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, if not, yes, does someone have a question?
Yeah, this is Yvonne. I want to know, if you're taking blood thinner, can you donate blood?
In and of itself, for the red cells, that would not be a problem. We do have a medication deferral list that we could take you through. I just jumped in and answered this. If someone else, I'm not sure if someone else was going to answer. Sorry.
No, you're the expert this evening. Thank you.
Okay. So for red cells, not, but we would have to do a proper evaluation to see if there are any other health or medication criteria, to understand why you're on the blood thinners.
Okay. Let's see, Ms. Jones, you had a question about the links.
Yes, I just want to know if the links that are in the chat, can they be emailed to us?
Did you register for your for the forum, Ms. Jones?
Yes, I did.
Okay, all right. Holly, can we, is there a way we can email those links out to the participants?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay, we'll get that to you. All right. If there are no other questions, I will turn it over to Holly to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next, we'd like to introduce Deidre Dixon, the CEO of the American Red Cross of Georgia. She oversees the Red Cross mission to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies statewide by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. Dee joined the Georgia Red Cross as Chief Development Officer in December 2017. During her tenure, development secured more than $81 million for Red Cross mission and played a pivotal role in fundraising for local and national disaster relief operations. She also made contributions to the organization as a division biomed leader for the Blood Saves Lives initiative in 2019 and led the diversity blood session for the National Fundraising Conference in 2020. In Georgia, Dee paved the way for a sickle cell disease awareness campaign that developed partnerships and virtual education forums with historically Black colleges and universities, elected officials, and faith-based communities. Please welcome Dee Dixon.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Holly, for that wonderful introduction. So first of all, let me just start at the beginning. I've got to say, Bikel, so good to see you. Bikel has been talking about this event. I guess January is when you shared it with the executive team, and I see some of those leaders on here tonight. So thank you so much for joining, and thank you for the partnership, Bikel. Dr. Lasky, as usual, you really just break this down to the easiest denominator that we can all relate. And that is, we just need to give blood. So hopefully you guys maybe took some from Dr. Lasky that, you know, a little bit of science will certainly help you make your determination to donate blood. But if the science does not, Kiara's story should. So Kiara, I tell you, I was not a blood donor until I began to hear stories like yours. And when I hear stories like yours, it just moves me that not only do I want to give, but now I'm inviting my family members to give. And my daughter and I gave for the first time in September, but it's because of stories like yours. Continue to share the story because it touches our heart. And I think it does just move some of us according to some of the comments in the chat. I just want to say thank you for all of you putting this event together tonight. But Kiara, you are a rock star. Thank you for being so eloquent in your delivery tonight. Really appreciate that. And you may be taking this show on the road. So thank you again. So I do want to just kind of say one thing that you mentioned, and we have really been talking about this. Everybody knows that we are in a national low blood crisis, but Black blood specifically is in dire need. And when Kiara said the COVID impact, if you are healthy, we take all precautions to make sure that you come into a clean and sterile environment, that we're all masked up, everything is sterilized, sanitized, and it is a safe environment to donate. So please don't let that stop you from making a blood donation in this COVID environment. We're hoping that that's going to end soon, but we can't wait. Help cannot wait. So without anything else, Holly, is there anything else that I need to share other than just to say thank you to this panel tonight?
That is all. And next up, if you'll just turn it over to Reverend Jackson, he will close us out.
Reverend Jackson.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you again for having me on. Certainly grateful to Holly Winter and to Elizabeth Starger, our chairperson, and certainly to Mikhail Fennell, who introduced me to the blood drive a year ago. And just a short testimony, it has been a blessing to me. I was afraid the first time that I gave blood, but Elizabeth held me down, Mikhail talked me through, and Holly was in the background. Someone's life was saved through my blood donation. And so that has been such a blessing to me, and I'm so grateful for it. And again, thank you to everyone that came on tonight.
Pastor Jackson.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, do you want to share the challenge that we have put forth and your call to action with the faith-based community?
All right. Yes, I've been challenged to challenge the faith-based community locally and in the region around, that we would challenge pastors and churches to come out and get our congregation involved into this blood drive. Our goal is to get at least 50 or more to come out, but the church that has the most, the pastor will receive the plaque for that year. The church will receive a plaque for that year, recognition that they brought the most people out. And then there will be a special gift presentation also that has come with that. And so I've sent it out to pastors starting tonight. I'm going to call them. I'm going to challenge them to get the most disciples out to donate blood. I've been challenged by Elizabeth. Miss Pittman is on here, Raquel is on here, and Zaza has challenged me that First Baptist is coming in first place. And so I have to get my numbers up. And so I'm challenging you all to join my team so that I can win this plaque for this year.
We coming for you, Mike.
All right, good stuff. Thank you all so much for coming this evening. We really appreciate all of our speakers. And we would like you all to, if you see the flyer here, to join us on Tuesday, February 22nd from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the Griggs Recreation Center. And we are planning to have exceed the donor donations this year. That is our goal. So I hope all of you will spread the word, spread the information that you received this evening, and we hope to see you on the 22nd.
Thank you.